On a sweltering summer day in 2015, in a remote rural area of Georgia, stood an abandoned mansion deep within a dense forest. This mansion had been deserted for over 50 years, and local residents whispered that it was haunted. Sarah, the character's name has been changed, a curious young woman with a penchant for exploring mysteries, had always wanted to set foot in this mansion. She had heard many chilling stories about it, about mournful cries echoing from within, and shadowy figures lingering behind the broken window panes. One Saturday afternoon, while hiking and exploring the area near her home, Sarah happened to come across the path leading into the woods where the mansion was located. The trail was overgrown with weeds and littered with dry, decaying branches. Sarah decided to venture inside. Despite everyone's warnings, she felt a strange urge, an irresistible curiosity. Sarah walked along the trail, and as she went deeper into the woods, the air became damp and cold. Sunlight barely penetrated the dense canopy, creating faint streaks of light on the ground. The cheerful chirping of birds gradually faded away, replaced by an eerie silence that enveloped the forest. Sarah felt a slight sense of unease, but her curiosity outweighed everything else. Finally, after a fairly long walk, Sarah saw the mansion appear before her. It stood majestically in the middle of the forest, a massive architectural structure that was now dilapidated and ruined. The brick walls were covered in moss. The broken window panes gaped like dark, empty eyes looking out at the world. The roof had collapsed in several places, revealing rotting wooden frames. The mansion exuded an aura of gloom and dread. Sarah approached closer, and she could see the details of the house more clearly. The main door had rotted and collapsed, revealing a pitch-black interior. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to dispel the feeling of unease rising within her. She decided to go inside, even though she knew there might be dangers waiting. Sarah stepped through the collapsed doorway. Setting foot inside the mansion, a smell of mildew, dust, and something metallic hit her nose, causing her to wrinkle her face. It was completely dark inside, with only a faint bit of light filtering through the broken windows. Sarah took out the flashlight from her backpack and turned it on. The flashlight beam illuminated the surrounding space, revealing a scene of desolation and ruin. The walls were peeling, and torn pieces of wallpaper lay scattered everywhere. The furniture inside was damaged and rotten, with torn sofas, broken-legged tables, and ripped paintings. Sarah felt like she had stepped into a world forgotten by time. As Sarah ventured deeper inside, she suddenly heard a strange noise coming from upstairs. It was the sound of very light footsteps. But in this absolute silence, it became incredibly clear. Sarah stopped, listening. The footsteps came again, this time a little louder, as if someone was walking on the rotting wooden floor upstairs. Sarah felt her heart beat faster. She was no longer alone in this mansion. Sarah stood silently, listening to the footsteps upstairs. They moved slowly, as if pacing from one room to another. Sarah felt a cold fear spread throughout her body. She didn't know who or what was up there, but she was certain it wasn't a normal person. She had checked around when she entered and hadn't seen any signs of homeless people or anyone else. Sarah decided she had to check what was happening upstairs. She gripped the flashlight tightly in her hand and carefully walked towards the staircase. The wooden steps were rotten and shaky, each step she took producing terrifying creaking sounds. She slowly climbed up, trying to be as quiet as possible. When she reached the second floor, Sarah found the hallway pitch black, without a single ray of light. The smell of mildew and something metallic was even stronger here than downstairs. Sarah shone her flashlight down the hallway, looking at the closed doors of the rooms. She felt a sense of unease rising within her. She had the feeling that someone was hiding behind those doors, watching her every move. Sarah walked along the hallway to the end, where she had first heard the footsteps. She stopped in front of an old wooden door that seemed to be slightly ajar. Sarah gently pushed the door, and it slowly creaked open, revealing a dark and dusty room. Sarah's flashlight beam swept across the room. She saw that it seemed to be an old bedroom, with a broken single bed, a tilted wardrobe, and a dressing table covered in dust. Scattered on the floor were shards of broken mirror and old personal belongings. Sarah felt a pang of sadness looking at this scene. Perhaps someone had once lived here, had loved and cherished this room. Suddenly, Sarah noticed something strange on the dressing table. It was an old music box, made of dark wood. The music box looked like it was still intact, not as damaged as the other objects in the room. Sarah curiously approached the dressing table and picked up the music box. The music box was quite heavy. The wooden surface was scratched and faded with time. Sarah carefully opened the lid of the music box. Inside, she saw a small porcelain doll, wearing a white dress that had turned yellow. The doll had a pretty face, but its eyes were empty, giving it a bizarre and frightening appearance. Just as Sarah touched the doll, she suddenly heard a soft melody playing. It was a gentle, sad tune, like an old lullaby. Sarah startled and quickly dropped the doll. The music stopped immediately. Sarah felt a cold shiver run down her spine. This music box didn't look like it could still work. So what was that music just now? Sarah looked around the room, trying to find the source of the music, but saw nothing. She felt a growing sense of unease. She had the feeling that someone was here, playing with her. Sarah decided she would leave this room immediately. She didn't want to stay here for another second. Just as Sarah turned to leave the room, she suddenly heard a very soft whisper right behind her. A high-pitched and cold voice said, "You can't leave." Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She slowly turned her head, looking into the darkness behind her. She saw no one, but she was sure she had just heard a voice. After hearing the chilling whisper, Sarah felt utter terror. She hurriedly ran out of the room and rushed down the stairs. Not daring to look back, she wanted to escape this terrifying mansion as quickly as possible. When she reached the first floor, Sarah stopped to catch her breath. She told herself that perhaps she had just imagined everything. Maybe it was just stress and fear. But as Sarah looked around the first floor, she suddenly noticed a small door at the end of the hallway that she hadn't paid attention to before. The door looked old and seemed to lead down to the basement. Sarah felt a surge of curiosity. Despite what she had just experienced, she wondered if any secrets were hidden in that dark basement. Sarah carefully approached the basement door. She tried to open it, and to her surprise, it wasn't locked. The door creaked as it slowly opened, revealing a pitch-black wooden staircase leading down into darkness. A smell of mildew and cold air wafted up to Sarah, making her shiver. Sarah took out her flashlight and shone it down the stairs. She saw that the steps were rotten and covered in dust. The space below was completely dark, and nothing could be seen clearly. Sarah hesitated for a moment, but then she decided to go down and see. She wanted to know what was hidden in this basement. Sarah carefully stepped down each stair, her footsteps echoing in the silent space. The deeper she went, the colder and more suffocating the air became. The smell of mildew and something metallic also became stronger. Sarah felt a growing sense of unease. She had the feeling that she was entering a place she shouldn't be. Finally, Sarah reached the bottom of the stairs. She shone her flashlight around and saw that she was in a large basement. The basement was damp and dark, with cold stone walls covered in green moss. Thick cobwebs hung from the ceiling. The basement looked more like an ancient prison than part of the mansion. Sarah ventured deeper into the basement, her flashlight beam illuminating the dark corners. She saw a few old wooden barrels, some damaged furniture, and a few rusty tools scattered on the floor. Everything was covered in dust and looked very old. Suddenly, Sarah noticed something strange in the corner of the room. It was a small iron door that looked very sturdy. The door was locked with a large, rusty padlock. Sarah approached the iron door, feeling an intense curiosity. She wondered what was hidden behind this door. Sarah tried to shake the door, but it remained tightly shut. She looked at the padlock. It seemed to have been locked for a very long time. Sarah tried to search around for anything that could be used to unlock it, but found nothing. She felt disappointed. Perhaps the secret of the basement would forever remain buried behind this iron door. Just as Sarah was about to turn around and go upstairs, she suddenly heard a very faint noise coming from behind the iron door. It was a soft scratching sound, as if someone was scratching on the inside of the door. Sarah stopped, listening. The scratching came again, this time a little louder, and then a weak whisper. "Help me." Sarah startled, her heart pounding. She pressed her ear against the iron door, trying to hear more clearly. The whisper came again, this time clearer. "Please, help me get out of here." Sarah felt a surge of horror and pity. She believed that someone was being held captive behind this door. Hearing the whispered cry for help, Sarah felt a strong urge to help the person imprisoned behind the iron door. She couldn't abandon that person in such a dangerous situation. Sarah tried to shake the door violently, but it didn't budge. She looked around the basement, trying to find anything that could help her break the lock or open the door. Sarah saw an old crowbar lying in the corner of the room. She quickly ran over and picked it up. The crowbar was quite heavy and rusty, but Sarah hoped it would be useful. She inserted the end of the crowbar into the gap between the door and the doorframe, trying to pry it open forcefully. The door made terrifying creaking sounds, but still didn't open. Sarah continued to try, sweat beginning to bead on her forehead. She used all her strength to pry, but the iron door remained steadfast. Sarah felt frustrated and worried. She didn't know if she was strong enough to open this door. Suddenly, as Sarah was trying to pry the door open, she heard a terrifying scream coming from behind the iron door. The scream shattered the silence of the basement, causing Sarah to jump and almost drop the crowbar. The scream sounded like a woman's, full of pain and despair. Sarah felt her heart stop. She knew that the person imprisoned behind this door was in extreme danger. She had to get that person out quickly. Sarah regained her composure and continued to pry the door with all her remaining strength. Finally, after many attempts, the rusty iron lock snapped open. The door creaked loudly as it slowly swung open. Sarah shone her flashlight inside and was horrified by what she saw. Behind the iron door was a small, narrow, dark, and damp room. On the floor, Sarah saw a decaying human skeleton, chained to the wall with a rusty iron chain. The clothes on the skeleton were torn and covered in dust. Sarah felt a wave of nausea rise up. She couldn't believe that she had just found the remains of someone who had died here a long time ago. As Sarah was trying to process what she had just seen, she suddenly heard another sound coming from the corner of the room. It was a very soft sobbing sound. Sarah shone her flashlight in that direction and saw a dark shadow huddled in the corner. The shadow had the shape of a woman, and Sarah recognized it as the ghost she had seen upstairs. The ghost of the woman slowly raised her head, looking at Sarah with tearful eyes. A weak voice echoed in the room. "Thank you for setting me free." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. She understood that the skeleton she had just found was the remains of this woman, and her spirit had been trapped here for many years. Sarah asked, "What happened to you? Who imprisoned you here?" The ghost of the woman looked at the skeleton on the floor and began to tell her story in a sad and mournful voice. She said her name was Eliza, and she had once been the owner of this mansion in the 1960s. She had been imprisoned in this basement by her own husband after discovering his dark secret. He had starved her to death, and her spirit had been bound to this house ever since. Eliza said that she had tried to contact the outside world many times, but no one had heard her cries for help. She had waited for many years until someone found her and set her free. After hearing Eliza's heartbreaking story, Sarah felt a strong determination to help her find peace. She had endured so much suffering and humiliation during her years of captivity. Sarah promised Eliza that she would find a way to get her remains out of the basement and report what had happened to the police. Eliza was incredibly grateful to Sarah. She said she had been waiting for this day for decades. Her spirit felt lighter knowing that someone finally believed her story and wanted to help her. Sarah carefully unchained the rusty iron chain from Eliza's skeleton. She felt a cold chill envelop her as she touched the dry bones. Sarah gently gathered the bone fragments and placed them in a scarf she had brought with her. She also collected the tattered pieces of clothing and the remaining personal belongings. After collecting Eliza's remains, Sarah carried them upstairs and carefully placed them in her backpack. She felt a heavy responsibility on her shoulders. She knew she had to do what was necessary to bring justice to Eliza. Sarah left the abandoned mansion, carrying Eliza's remains and its dark secrets. She walked back home, her heart filled with mixed emotions. She had just gone through a terrifying experience, but at the same time, she felt a strange joy and peace for having helped an unfortunate soul. As soon as she got home, Sarah called the police and reported what she had found in the abandoned mansion. She recounted Eliza's story in detail and handed over the remains she had brought back. The police were shocked to hear Sarah's story and promised to investigate immediately. A few days later, the police went to the abandoned mansion and conducted a thorough examination of the scene. They found evidence corroborating Sarah's account, including the rusty iron chain and signs indicating that Eliza had been imprisoned in the basement. They also found some old documents in the house, including records about Eliza's husband, a wealthy and influential man in the area. After investigating, the police confirmed that Eliza had been murdered by her own husband in the 1960s. The husband had died many years ago, but finally, the truth about his crime had been revealed. Eliza's remains were taken for proper burial. Sarah attended her funeral, feeling a strange sense of peace as she watched the coffin being lowered into the ground. Finally, Eliza had found rest after years of captivity and suffering. Sarah never forgot what she had experienced in that abandoned mansion. She had uncovered a dark secret and helped an unfortunate soul find release. This experience changed her life forever. She became more believing in the spiritual world and was always ready to help those in need. Despite helping Eliza's spirit find peace, Sarah could never forget what she had experienced in the abandoned mansion. The horrifying images of the chained skeleton, Eliza's ghost, and the whispered cries for help continued to haunt her dreams. She knew that a part of the memory of that house would forever be etched in her mind. After this incident, Sarah became much more cautious about exploring abandoned places. She realized that sometimes, the secrets hidden in those places could be more dangerous than she imagined. She also understood that not all spirits seek help. Sometimes, there are evil forces lurking and waiting for curious wanderers to stray into their path. However, this experience also gave Sarah a deeper empathy for unfortunate souls. She believed that sometimes, those who have passed away still linger in this world because of the pain and injustice they suffered while alive. And if given the opportunity, she would always be willing to help them find peace. Sarah never returned to that abandoned mansion. She knew that Eliza had found rest, and there was no reason for her to risk going back to that place filled with terrifying memories. The mansion still stood there, silent in the woods, carrying the dark secrets of the past. But now, it was no longer a prison for a soul. Sarah's story is a warning about the potential dangers of exploring abandoned places. Always be careful and think twice before venturing into places you don't know well. Sometimes, curiosity can lead to unforeseen consequences. If you enjoyed these true horror stories, remember to hit the subscribe button on the channel so you don't miss our latest videos. We will bring you more terrifying and haunting stories. Thank you for listening.